Rolla, 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 something like that. Hunter and I go to Operation Fenderhalle 4? Yeah, that place. That's right, Hunter and I went to a team tourney. As you can see, this is his list right here, featuring 1140 worth of points. He is going to do the heavy lifting with the Panzer IIIs to do infantry mop-up and the Panzer IVs to deal with the other tanks. While on the other hand, I have the Panzer Pioneers with their ubiquitous trucks. I mean, I painted them all up for this, but I rarely ever see them on the field. But I have everything else required to support his list. The first round of the tourney is Blind Domination, a mission that I have not played before, but I suspect I'll play it again in the future because it's actually fairly interesting in how it supports kind of a random deployment and doesn't really lend itself to some crazy deployment shenanigans like a denied flank. Not at least in a conventional sense. Sadly, as we roll into the first turn, I did not take a very close look at my buddy's list, and as you can see, they're rolling on already with his Recce units, which is something interesting about Blind Domination, because you move all your Recce units first. I move my KFC 222s up forward to try to take a position and take that 2-point objective, while he moves on with a whole bunch of Universal Carriers. His list consists mostly of I think 2 elements of infantry. You got some British infantry and some U.S. Armored Infantry, and if memory serves, 2 Churchills and a whole scat of Stuarts and some 25 pounders. It's a pretty well-rounded list. But as you can see at the end of this first turn, the Recce units move onto the board and actually make themselves worthwhile, whereas in most games Recce, it does a lot of really cool stuff, but it really gives them a unique value in a game scenario that allows them to come onto the board unopposed. Now, Hunter and I's, our idea here was to allow the tanks to kind of push forward, capture the middle, and then just kind of hold on while air support kind of does its thing, because we've got priority air, and that we expect to get as much out of that as possible. I don't normally get games with priority air, and I'm really excited to use it. He moves up his armored infantry up into the bocage onto the left side of the board and begins threatening that objective in the center. It's wide out in the open, but in Blind Domination you have to previously set where all your stuff's going to come in, and we're reading him like a book. We already got the Panzer Pioneers are ready to come in to oppose him. He moves the artillery up and spaces them out real nicely with that little Stuart observation tank. That thing ends up being really annoying. And as they close out the end of their second turn, they begin moving forward and taking other objectives. They're threatening the center of the board with the recon, and that's just awesome. I really enjoy that the recon has a very unique, highly valuable asset in this scenario. As we begin our turn, we dismount the observers for the Nebelwerfer battery that has yet to come onto the board. The Panzer IIIs begin moving up the more busy side of the board, where I suspect that they might involve themselves into an infantry assault. The Panzer IVs moves up onto the right side of the board. I advise Hunter to not try to get into a gun duel with any other tanks. Just move out there. If you can take a shot, that's great, and then just, stormtrooper back behind cover. Deny all the shots that you can. And as I'm excited to finally have a game where I have air cover, it rolls in. We got Hans here with his 7 dice and 2 planes, decides to roll in on the guns. I want to pin them at the very least. I don't expect to do a whole lot of damage. He manages to do a strafing run, pins the guns, but if memory serves, they just unpin. There's not a whole lot going on there. As we roll into turn 3, this is when the magic happens in Domination, because everybody starts rolling in. Normally it's only 2 platoons that rolls in on the second turn. On turn 3, everything rolls in. So now he's just going to get everything that he elected not to send, which I do believe is another infantry company and several other tanks, Stuarts, and all kinds of nonsense. It's really going to put us pressure on us to move forward and take things. As you can see, this open field right in front of the 25-pounder batteries, we're not going to involve ourselves with it. There's actually an objective right to the left of that picture, and we're going to try to avoid ever going out there, sending the Panzer IVs out there to deal with it. It's just not something that we have any interest in doing, and as you can see, he is just flooding forward. The gates are open as the infantry move forward and begin situating themselves in such a way that they can rush into the center, while the stewards back up the infantry that are moving through the bocage. And as the Allied turn 3 comes to a close, the pressure is on for the Germans as the Allied infantry are pushing themselves onto the 2-point objective on the left side of the board seen here, with only our KFZ-222 capable of doing anything about it. We're not going to be able to push off that amount of infantry, and with those stewards breathing down on the KFC, it's not really a tank. It gets lit up on the first shot they make. The Allies get first blood on this one. But we're not going to take that lying down. The Stuarts are easily the most terrifying unit on the board for me. This will actually turn out to be the Churchills on the other side of the board. So we move up the infantry with that gratuitous shot of the trucks that generally will never be seen again as they move forward, and they decide to dismount. We actually did this wrong. They should have just moved forward and got out, but I left the trucks on there. I mean, it looks cool. The other ones move forward and they operate properly. Stormtroopering out of the vehicles later, and they're going to take up position in those buildings, while the Panzer IIIs move up to the center of the city and start taking up defilade positions in such a way that they can provide support for the KFC that's moving up there and being just a cheeky little cunt trying to take on the number 4 objective in the center of the board. He is actually within spitting distance of a bunch of units behind him. The Panzer IIIs decide to open up on the half-tracks out in the open. There was a little bit of confusion because one of those half-tracks apparently was part of this armored rifle platoon, but we just went ahead and he was shooting at the half-tracks and we just kind of, spitballed it. And they manages to take out the CO of that unit. The Hans decides to come back. He finds the infantry out in the open, and because the KFC is dead, they aren't waved off. They manage to do all kinds of damage. Pins the infantry platoon, flies off. Nebelwerfers show up and just kind of say, how do you do? They don't manage to do a whole lot of damage this turn. But that plane sure did. Hans earns his meal as he dusts off like 3 or 4 different stands. It's pretty great. I can't really disagree with the results. While the infantry move up into the buildings, and the buildings actually happen to be in a really neat little formation. They're all like within 6 inches of each other. So all those Panzer Pioneers are going to start leapfrogging one building to the next until we filled one after the other completely full of infantry. Here you can actually see a really good shot of where that KFC stormtroopered back around the corner of the building, and he's just being really annoying to all those units that can't really affect him. But the Churchills are right around the corner, and in the beginning of the Allied turn 4, they're going to make their presence felt as they move up the street and start engaging the Panzer IVs that can open them up, but it's a deadly game because that front armor 5 on the Panzer IV F2 is just not going to bounce every shot off the Churchill. The Churchill is just a superior tank in almost every way. We got to be very careful about that. Allied mission turns deadly as a smoke mission in the center of the town clouds up all the shots. Churchills take a shot at some of the Panzer IVs, do quite a bit of damage, killing one of them, bailing a couple others, and the Stuarts manage to cause a recce move. They decide to reorganize to get out of the way. In return, the cheeky little Allied bastards move a bunch of those universal carriers out into the middle of a field to try to take the second position, but we have nothing of it. Instead of not engaging through that smoky haze, we decide to go ahead and move the Panzer IVs off there to way over-apply their overwhelming firepower and just light them up, ignoring the Churchills for a turn and dealing with what could have been a game-crippling problem. If we moved those Panzer IVs out into the open, they would have just been shot up by those 25-pounders. Hans feels his oats, swigs back a little bit of that stolen vodka, sees all of those Allied infantry out there in the open. I decided to go ahead and risk it, picking a target that could be potentially waved off because of it being close to a building, and he doesn't. He manages to kill like 3 stands, pins 4 different platoons. Oh, it was just glorious. And as we close out the turn, the Nebelwerfers hit the infantry out in the open, kill another stand. The Allied infantry have yet to dig in that open area. Pinned since the moment they got out there, the German infantry are making their presence felt and are going to put themselves into a position to assault the next turn. As turn 5 begins, the Allies push forward, getting real aggressive with those Churchills to try to make their way down, to try to take on those Panzer III's, give them too much to take on, because that front armor on the Churchill is just awesome, while the Panzer IVs are momentarily distracted, off dealing with other issues on the other side of the board. Their infantry fan out in the back end and they start moving forward, perhaps a little delayed after Hans went in there and just ripped them all up. But, you know, I'm not really complaining. They smoke the center of the town again, trying to make sure that we keep moving and lose rate of fire. Stuarts also swing out into the open. They're making their way into such a way that if I'm going to assault with the infantry, I have to assault through an open field. And they also move up closer to all the infantry. The Panzer Pioneers have been just leapfrogging from one building to the next. And now they've engaged in a massive firefight between the two buildings. The Churchill right there was next to like 3 or 4 stands of infantry, but the MG Pioneers just opened up the Daka and ripped them up as the other Pioneers open up. Having taken advantage of the pinned state of the American infantry, they move out into the open, and success upon success, they completely evaporate the American infantry, killing nearly everything despite the tank nearby being unable to help. I think we lose maybe 1 or 2 stands in the exchange and we kill like 7. It's just great. The American infantry platoon is down to 1 or 2 stands. He manages to make morale though, and we don't quite break it completely off the board, but we manage to at least take the objective and flip it back into our hands. Hunter's tanks move forward. Panzer IVs find their mark on one of the Churchills, blowing it to pieces. Now they've only got 1 Churchill left, and I'm pretty sure the rest of our Panzers can take care of it. They're actually holding down the center of town pretty well all by themselves, having lost only 1 tank. But this is pretty much going to be the last turn. We don't have enough time to do another turn, and that's just kind of the shame of it. We had them kind of on the ropes, but at the time I was really concerned that things might swing the other way very quickly. But looking at it now, it's very clear that we were just kind of on the verge of mopping things up. I mean, the worst that they had was a couple Stuarts. And that's where the game was left. Tie game. We both killed a platoon. We killed their universal carriers in one fell swoop. We lost the 222 recon platoon that we had. They failed morale after having gotten the raw end of it from real tanks and decided to bolt. It was a good game. I look forward to playing against Rick and Mike again in the future. And hopefully the Germans will be a little bit more triumphant, right? So that's been an Ouchies Batrep, and thanks for watching. Things are looking up for the Rolla tourney. Let's see how the next 2 rounds go.